Hi, today we're going to talk about shock. One of the things that can happen in a suicide is that your whole body just goes through shock. I lived in California for 20 years and we got used to earthquakes, and earthquakes just rattle everything. The harder the earthquake, the more rattled you get. And one of the things about suicide is it can rattle you in all directions. It rattles your emotions, it rattles you physically, it rattles you emotionally, and it rattles you spiritually. The shock is like just a violent, unexplained blow that just hits you and throws your equilibrium totally off. Everything in your life is disturbed. And this is what happened with the suicide that we're going to talk about today. When I worked for the Disney organization, I met an older lady, and because I had no family, she kind of took me under wing like a mom. I'd spend Sundays with her and her cousin, even traveled with them to Hawaii and other places, and we had a really nice relationship. However, at one point, shortly after I was married to my husband, I came home from work one day and I had a letter waiting from them. The letter informed me that they had both committed suicide, that they were there in their bed at their home about an hour from where I lived, and that I needed to go and get the police, get the coroner, and take care of having their bodies found and having their bodies taken care of according to their wishes. Talk about a shock. Talk about something that just blew my equilibrium out of the water. Is here, no idea that this was going to happen. No idea whatsoever. They had been at my wedding. They had been very kind to my husband and myself. And all of a sudden, here I am charged with finding their bodies and taking care of everything in their home. I'd like to say I handled it perfectly well. I didn't. I was a brand new baby in the Lord. I'd been saved for a very, very short amount of time. And as with great shocks in your system, you kind of have a tendency to revert to old patterns. It's like I felt like I needed to have a drink. I had been an alcoholic for years, and when I got saved, God helped heal me from that. But my first reaction, the first thing that my shock system went to was I must need to have a drink, which wasn't true. That isn't what I needed at all. It's very important for us to understand that shock can just, it throws you. It throws you totally off. One of the things that happened during this time, and one of the things that I will forewarn you about in suicide, is while I was cleaning out their home, I found out that they were homosexual and that they were not cousins, but they were lovers. And so I will forewarn you that sometimes what you find out after a person commits suicide can redouble that shock that you've already had. It can throw you off even more. The Bible is very clear that when we go through situations like this, that when we go through shock, when everything in our world is turned upside down, is shaken, that God has a very special ministry for people that are in this position. In her book, Having a Merry Spirit by Joanna Weavers, she talks about these things as being earthquakes, and that what these earthquakes do is they leave a fault line. And if you know anything about the San Andreas fault line in California, what happens is that every time there's a mini earthquake or any other kind of an earthquake, that fault line shakes. And at some point, that fault line could break. The same thing happens in us when we go through shock. We have these fault lines. There are fault lines in our body. There are fault lines in our spirit. There are fault lines in our emotions. And what the enemy wants to do with these fault lines is he wants to shake you again. And ultimately, he wants to break those fault lines and destroy you. In her book, Joanna Weaver says, "We have a mighty God who is able to redeem our darkest moments and deepest fears. A loving Father who promises to keep watch at all our points of vulnerability, to strengthen us where we are weak, to correct the lies that have been led astray, and to heal the rifts in our soul. Those rifts are our fault lines, but only if we give him access. Unless we adopt a spirit, unless we adopt and give God permission to straighten out the twisted mess that this has caused in our lives, we don't have much hope of avoiding an invasion by the enemy. It comes down to this: the pain and injustice of life, the wrongdoings of others may twist and distort us, creating fault lines and weak areas. But it is our response to these issues that makes the real difference. It is what we do or what we allow God to do. When you are shaken, your mind is not clear. Your mind is not settled. Your mind gets confused about things. And so it's really important to understand that at these points, you need to allow God to help you. You need to allow God to take control and to protect your mind and protect your spirit and protect your emotions from those things that you're going through. Because those fault lines, those shakings that you go through with these earthquakes, they have after tremors. And those after tremors can be very dangerous and very detrimental to your life. I think it's important to understand that in Sparkling Gems by Rick Renner, which I have talked about before, that God wants to give you a peace that passes understanding. God wants to give you a peace in the midst of your struggles. God wants to give you a peace in the midst of the shock. God wants to give you a peace that settles these fault lines and gives you an opportunity to regroup, to reestablish who you are and reestablish the things that God has for you. God says that it is a peace so superior, it is held high above all other types of peace. It is a peace that transcends, outdoes, surpasses, excels, rises above, and goes way beyond any other kind of peace. And with this peace, what God wants to do is he uses this peace to guard and control and monitor everything that tries to enter your heart, your mind, or your emotions. He wants to protect you. He wants to take care of you from those attacks that would come towards you. It's when the peace of God is standing guard at the entrance of your heart and mind, the devil has lost access to your thought life and to your emotions. Philippians 4 can say, and the peace of God, a peace so wonderful that it cannot be compared to any other kind of peace, a peace that stands in a category all by itself and rises far above and goes beyond anything the human mind could ever think, reason, imagine, or produce itself. You will stand at the entrance of your heart and your mind, working like a guard. God wants to guard your heart and your mind, to control, to monitor, and to screen everything that tries to access your mind, your heart, and your emotions. God is so concerned about you when you're in a state of shock. God is so concerned about you and wants to protect you, wants to take care of you, wants to watch over you, wants to give you a peace that's going to guard your heart. Our hearts need guarding beyond anything when we're in shock. We don't make good decisions. We don't think clearly because everything is shaken. Our equilibrium is gone. And so it's very important that God says in the same way, his peace will keep fretfulness, anxiety, worry, and all other wiles of the devil from breaking into your life. When this peace is active in your life, it surpasses all natural understanding. It protects, it guards, it keeps, and it defends you. Shock is such a detrimental thing to your spirit and to your soul and to your heart and to your mind. God tells us that nothing compares to this wonderful protective guarding peace that God has positioned to stand at the entrance of your heart and your mind. When this peace operates in you, it dominates your mind and your life. Since what is inside you is that which rules you, peace rises up and conquers your entire being. It stands at the gate of your heart and mind, disabling the devil's ability to disturb you by preventing his attacks from bypassing and slipping into your mind. The devil may try his best to find access to your mind and emotions, but this guarding peace will paralyze his efforts. God has a plan. God tells us in Isaiah 61 that he came to grant joy and consolation to those who mourn. He came to give them a garland of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a heavy, burdened, and failing spirit. When you feel like you're burdened, when you feel like all you see is ashes, when you feel like all that you have is mourning, or that you're heavily laden, God wants to come and change those for you. God wants to give you a peace that allows you to stabilize your life. God wants to give you a peace that keeps you from doing foolish things, from doing the things that the enemy would like you to do while you're in a state of shock. God wants to take that shock and replace it with his peace that will guard you, his peace that will watch over you, his peace that will take care of you, his peace that will give you clarity of thought, his peace that will control your emotions so that you can do the right things, his peace that will guard your mouth, will guard your thoughts, will guard your will, and God will watch over each and every one of those things for you. Shock can take you out, but God can bring you back. It's important to understand that there is nothing that can destroy your life. God says that we're built on the solid rock, and that the winds can come, the waves can come, but that we will stand fast as long as we allow him to treat our shock and give us his peace and allow him to watch over us and to protect us and to take care of us during this time. And so my prayer is that you will allow God to move your shock into his peace. Thank you for that. I'll see you soon.